You are listening to The World As I See It podcast. 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 As I See It.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The World As I See It podcast. Welcome to episode 47. Today we are talking about an interesting question. It honestly took me by surprise. It caught me off guard and it made me think. So this question is, if I wanted to see anyone, who would it be and why? Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's an incredibly tough question for me to answer. Because I don't know. And here's why I don't know. Since I've been completely blind my entire life, I have never seen a single thing. And I don't have any visual concept of facial expressions or features or what people actually look like. But when I really take a minute to slow down and process the idea and break it down, a few very specific, deeply personal thoughts, they come forward. And it's just a fascinating concept to explore because my entire understanding the world and of the people around me and of my environment, it's built through a completely different perspective. I go through the world using sound, textures, and just detail. And I pay attention to tone, things like that where, you go through the world differently. So the idea of suddenly having a massive stream of visual data to process, it's kind of a mind-blowing thought. It isn't just about opening my eyes and instantly seeing. It's completely, I guess you could say, different from how you connect with the world around you. When I think about this hypothetical scenario, my mind, it doesn't immediately jump to famous landmarks, beautiful landscapes, or grand, things like the Grand Canyon or a starry night sky like people may think. And while those things would, undoubtedly be incredible to experience, I really think my very first thoughts are 100% personal. I think about the people who, that are the core of my life, the voices that I associated with love, comfort, and guidance, and the visual mysteries about myself that I've always wondered about. Now, the very first person I think that I would want to look at is my mom. And here's why. A lot of people say that I look like my mom. And I don't know what she looks like. That's what a lot of people say. So, I would want to see, her facial structure, expressions and smiles and things that I don't see. I don't see expressions. I don't see smiles. Maybe the physical resemblance of how we look. Because it's just kind of, you start to wonder, what does that actually look like? Because, yeah, you can describe it to an extent, but I've never seen anything. That's why it's hard, if that makes sense. And, I know what she sounds like, but I don't know what she looks like. So, if you were suddenly given the gift of sight, I would want to look, at her face and just see for myself. And another thing that I would want to look at is myself, in a mirror. Because, you get to look at a mirror, and yes, I would want to see my family and friends. And because you can spot people around by looking at them, whereas I have to listen for their voice. And I just would want to see facial expressions in general, because I've never seen those. And like I said, I would want to see myself. Okay, you do this a lot, multiple times a day, side of people, without even thinking about it. You look in a mirror. You look to check your hair, maybe your teeth, maybe your makeup. I don't know what it is, but you look in a mirror. Well, for me, looking in a mirror, it's a completely different concept. I know what my face feels like through touch and what people tell me, but feeling a shape with your finger, it's probably way different from seeing it with your eyes. If I had a chance to look at the mirror with full sight, I feel like I would just stare at my own reflection and just study it for a while. And that may sound weird, but I would just want to see my own expressions in real time. And I would want to see what I'd look like when I laugh, what my eyes look like when I'm talking about something exciting, and fully see what I look like from my perspective. And having sight would allow me to, see myself visually. While it's incredibly fun to imagine this scenario, the reality of it is, if somebody who was blind gained sight one day, it would be very overwhelming, because the brain hasn't had time to learn how to connect visually. Because you've not seen anything. Like me, I haven't seen anything at all. So the brain would have to learn how to see. Because my brain has spent my whole life optimizing my hearing, my touch, and my spatial awareness, the visual parts of my brain, they, haven't had time. I would have to learn. It couldn't just be instant. I couldn't just immediately get sight and go, oh, this is this and this is this. I would have to learn shapes and shadows, and since my brain hasn't processed light, I'd have to process it, if that makes sense. If my eyes suddenly started sending visual signals to my brain, it would intentionally be an absolute overload of information. My brain wouldn't instantly know that a specific shadow means an object is sticking out, or that a faraway car is actually large but just looks small because of distance. So I would have to look at, I feel like if I had sight, I would have to look at my mom's face while listening to her voice, so that my brain could make that connection, and connect those two pieces of info. It would be a massive, exhausting, yet completely beautiful educational journey for my mind. Thinking about this topic also makes me realize how much I appreciate the unique perspective that I also have right now. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again, blindness isn't a tragedy. There are advantages to being blind. If you haven't listened to that episode, go listen to that episode. But because I cannot see, like I said, I've said this, and this is my unique perspective. Because I cannot see people, I judge them entirely on who they are on the inside. Instead of my version of seeing a person is how they treat others, their sense of humor, their intelligence, and their, authenticity. I see people for their true selves without the distraction of visual, appearance. Because sighted people may often, appearances can be deceiving. But for me, that is just everyday reality. I get to experience people at their core. So, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Somebody asked me that question a few weeks ago, and I had to really think about that. And I hope that all of that made sense. But if you have any feedback about the show or any questions for future episodes, you can leave a comment down below. Or you can send me an email directly at theworldasIseeitpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning in for episode 47. Stay curious, keep listening, and I will talk to you in episode 48.
You've been listening to The World as I See It podcast.